All right, it's time for business, and Emmanuel Bajoyafe is here with issues having to do with the closure of Nigeria's border with Benin. Hello, Emmanuel.
Exactly. Hi, Izzy. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How about you?
I'm fine, thanks.
All right, you take it away.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to business. Pressure is still mounting on Nigeria to reopen its land border with Benin. For now, the closure of the border continues to have a toll on the trading community in Ghana, especially exporters and haulage drivers. Ghana's largest local beverage manufacturing company, Cybersecurity, says it has already lost about $2 million in export revenue as a result of the 2-month closure of the border. Charles Aite has been engaging head of international business development of the company and has come through with this report.
It has been 2 months since the closure of the Nigerian-Benin border. Joy Business had earlier engaged some haulage drivers who've been kicked out of business.
Just because of the close the border, so you can't go. So we came back to house and then we are waiting the time they are going to open the border.
This time around, we placed a spotlight on Ghana's largest local beverage manufacturing firm, Cybersecurity.
We've dry out of product in the market per my last visit, so competition is going to hit on us.
Francis Holy Aja is head of international business development. He tells Joy Business $2 million has so far been lost to the closure.
We currently losing about average $1 million a month, $1 million a month.
So now they are stuck on the other side of the border. They cannot come in because the border is closed. So it will affect us on the production side as well, because we will not have raw material to produce the cartons.
So what it means is that in the coming months or so, production numbers could reduce drastically from the side of Cybersecurity.
Yes, it's going to reduce, and this is too bad for us because we're getting close to Christmas, and you know it's the peak season for us, and having short of some of these materials will really affect our volumes.
So far, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration has appealed to Ghanaian traders to remain calm as it works with the Nigerian authority to ease its ban on the exportation of non-traditional products into the latter's market.
And away from that, Communication Minister Esther Owusu-Ekuful is asking stakeholders to support government with alternate funding sources in fighting cybercrime. According to her, the National Cybersecurity Center, which has been created to help safeguard the country against cyber attacks, will not be deriving full revenue to be accrued from the 3% communication service tax. She was speaking at the sidelines of the climax of the National Cybersecurity Awareness Month celebration here in Accra. That's more in this report.
Government has indicated that part of the 3% communication service tax will be used to fund operations of the Cybersecurity Center created under the Ministry of Communication. According to the Minister, Esther Owusu-Ekuful, the revenue to be generated from the tax is inadequate to protect the country's cyberspace, hence the need for other sources of funding.
And so even though for us it is inadequate, we've done a fair bit with largely no support from central government, but with support from our agencies and international donors. We can do even more with this support from central government, both from the communication service tax and from budgetary allocations. And so we're looking forward to see what we can do in terms of our activities over the years. For one thing, and that has been highlighted in many of the speeches that were read this morning, we need to step up our awareness creation.
Though she could not disclose the amount to be allocated to the center, she is optimistic that the finance minister will give details on how the fund will be utilized.
It is impossible for us to get the 100%, and I have made those attempts, and so I know that we won't get it. Even the revenue that is going to accrue from the 3% increase, we have already been informed that it will not be earmarked for cybersecurity alone. But the finance minister has assured us that this is just a start. He will look for other sources of funding to support our activities. And he's an honorable man, so I know he would live up to his promises. He also recognizes how critical this is to the digital economy that we are building.
The Cybersecurity Awareness Month is celebrated under the theme, Demonstrating Ghana's Cybersecurity Readiness. The month-long celebration is aimed at exhibiting strategies by government in fighting the threat of cyber attacks. Ibn Sabute's report for Joy Business.
Meanwhile, National Cybersecurity Advisor Albert Ntwi-Boesiakon has expressed disappointment at the ongoing debate on the use of the Communication Service Tax to fund the Center in Fighting Cybercrime Activities. According to him, taxing stakeholders to fight the emergence of cyber attack is not a new phenomenon in Africa, especially considering the current trend of attacks on the continent. Mr. Ntwi-Boesiakon, who was also speaking at the climax of the National Cybersecurity Month under the theme Demonstrating Ghana's Cybersecurity Readiness.
Stakeholders, including advocacy groups, do have the right and are even encouraged to discuss and propose alternative funding models to support this government initiative. It is therefore disappointing to note that none of the dissenting voices against the increase in the communication service tax have actually come out to provide alternative models and proposals to fund Ghana's cybersecurity. The public's narrative on the subject, especially in the media, has largely, respectfully, been built around misinformation and misunderstanding of the noble intent of this particular action. I am afraid that if we do not invest by making dedicated funding, the very gains that we've made are not going to be sustainable. Ladies and gentlemen, permit me once again to correct one erroneous impression being also circulated in the media. The government is not going to use the CST, as far as my knowledge of the subject matter is concerned, to fund cybersecurity for the banks and the telcos. That has never been the intent. The government is going to use the CST, which constitutes only a fraction of the funding requirement that we need to finance the implementation of Ghana's national cybersecurity policy strategy, of which a copy is available for scrutiny and for a very scientific discourse. The various initiatives to be implemented are all clearly stated, as I've already mentioned. And the Center has received valuable input and suggestions from important local and international institutions in shaping the policy and the strategy. As we take the next steps on our journey to scale up our cybersecurity readiness, Madam Minister, I encourage stakeholders here present to actively engage in evidence-based discussions, devoid of politics and misinformation, as the issues at stake are critical to our digital life and experiences.
And that's all in the first segment of business. There'll be more business news when I return after 8. Hello again and welcome to the second segment of business news. The IMF says it welcomes how government has handled the recent banking sector cleanup. The head of African department at the IMF disclosed this at a news conference at the end of the IMF World Bank meetings in Washington, D.C. George Piafe has more.
The Bank of Ghana in 2017 began a series of exercises to clean the banking sector due to what it describes as weak governance structures and banks with serious liquidity issues. The move led to the collapse of 7 commercial banks, some savings and loans, and microfinance institutions in the country. The exercise has been criticized by some analysts because of the associated shocks to the economy. Some have even attributed the recent liquidity squeeze to this banking sector cleanup. But answering questions from journalists at the annual IMF World Bank meetings in Washington, D.C., head of the African department, Bibi Selassie, says these actions have rather brought the needed confidence in the whole banking system in the country.
On financial sector cleanup, the cost of cleanup in Ghana, I think it underscores why we as an institution put so much stress on making sure that banks are supervised, regulated as well as possibly can be done. I think given that many of our economies are getting financial sector development is really taking hold, financial sectors are deepening. The importance of upgrading banking supervision, banking regulation is going to be really, really important to avoid exactly the kind of situations that you explained. The alternative to not cleaning up the banking sector, of course, is an even bigger cost to the budget and also, of course, to the economy as disruption can be caused. So I think a central lesson, a really important takeaway is the importance of real-time regulation to make sure that banks are adhering to all of the requirements to practice safe banking.
He also rejected arguments that the African Free Trade Deal will not be beneficial to all member countries in the region.
The smaller economies have opened up their markets to China, to European countries and the like, right? So even assuming that Nigeria or Ethiopia will dominate their sub-region, is it preferable to be dominated by China rather than Ethiopia, Nigeria? I don't know. I mean, so, I just want to, yes, I mean, as always, when you have structural change, there is a dislocation, there can be, losses in some sectors. I think the key thing is whether it's opening up to China or to Europe versus to Nigeria. I think the key really is about making sure that you have policies in place to support sectors that may be dislocated, and that, in general, the more competition, other things equal, tends to be a bit better than having the situation where when you're not trading with each other.
On the Ghanaian economy, he was optimistic that the expected turnaround and firm stability would happen very soon.
Now, Ghanaians have been urged to cultivate the habit of savings at banks and credit unions. According to the manager of the Tumu Community Cooperative Credit Union, Aisha Batongo, future livelihoods are well secured through savings at credit unions. Madam Aisha gave the advice at the celebration of the International Credit Unions Day at Jirapa in the Upper West region. Rafiq Salam reports.
The Jirapa St. Joseph's Cooperative Credit Union was established in 1955 by Catholic priest Reverend Father John McNulty. It was the first credit union to be started in Ghana and by extension the whole of Africa. To mark the 71st anniversary of the International Credit Unions Day, organizers of the program thought it wise to host it at this place of birth, Jirapa. It was held on the theme Local Service, Global Reach. The various credit union chapters in the Upper West region and beyond took part in the celebration of the day. They had a procession through some principal streets at Jirapa amid music from brass band. They later converged at the Reverend Father John McNulty Memorial Hall, where various speeches were delivered on why they need to join the credit unions.
It is because of that local service in the communities across the world that we have a global credit union movement that now have over 206 million members all over. Hence, a call to celebrating the impact credit unions and other financial cooperatives have made and continue to make for their members.
This seed was sown here in Jirapa. It has caught fire across the African continent. And in our chapter, we are unable to hit the ground and break it properly.
In our foreign wrap segment, Africa's biggest oil producer can't beat fuel imports addiction. Details next.
Africa's biggest oil producer is trying to get its refineries working in an attempt to wean itself of imported fuel.